Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm April Weitkamp. I am a life skills teacher here in Everett, Public Schools. I have been teaching some level of self-contained special education for, I think I mathematically figured out it's like 22 years. So a long time. I've been up here in Everett for 15, 16, and have learned a lot over the years with some really phenomenal SLPs. And I like to come and kind of share some of the things that I do to make communication happen in the classroom. And so what we're going to do today is we'll talk about my class, a little bit about some of the basic communication that I do, and then I have some examples and ideas for each curricular area within a classroom. So ways that you can work on adding some of that to what you do. Okay, so welcome to my school. I got all sorts of fancy stuff. We are the Chargers. We love our rhinoceros. He's our mascot. Like I said, I've been in Everett for quite a while. We have about 500 students here. We have 3 self-contained programs plus a new transitional kindergarten that has full inclusion. So it's a great building with a lot of wonderful support amongst our team. So just a little bit about us. Let's talk about what we're going to do. I usually run about 50 minutes on these and I talk quickly. So let me know. We are going to talk about at least one high-tech AAC thing that you can incorporate in your classroom. I brought my trusty little extra iPad with a couple of the different apps on it so I can model a little of that. I also brought my pod. It is obviously very well loved and pretty dead because it's one of the things that I use. And then we'll talk about how we do it within literacy, in addition to some other things that I included. And please interrupt me as I go if you need clarification, if you've got struggles, if you've got examples. I love when people share. It's the only way we learn. So go right ahead and do so. Okay, so a little bit about my program. My goal, I call it a goal because we can always go over. My goal size is 10. Our standard set is 2 classroom para educators plus any dedicated one-on-ones. I currently have K4. It can be a K5. We are looking to go back to a split model, which I'm really excited about. And both my SLP and my PT embed in the classroom when they can, and they do the communication and the motor work within the room where it's most applicable, because then we can watch and play off of each other and learn as well, and the kids start to generalize those skills a lot faster. So just kind of what mine looks like. So this Teresa and I were talking about just at the beginning. This is my favorite drawing for the year. This is hard and we are tired. And I have a group of kids this year who have not had a whole lot of communication. So it's been really difficult and different for me because I had a group that I'd had for a really long time and they had good motivation. And so it's taken a long time to adjust and for us to start seeing those things happen with the kids. But we're just at that point where I'm starting to get my goosebumps and get my really excited face when things happen. And those little things that are such huge celebrations when we're working with our kids have been happening. And it's part of what's kind of keeping me going at this point. Oh, and behind me here, I have my core vocabulary board. I will show you a little bit about how we do that. I brought one of my games that we've been working on right now. So in my world, communication is everything. It's right fun. And it is modeled as much as we possibly can all day long. And I'm a firm believer in, telling kids that they can tell me no, and telling kids that they can teach me how to tell me to go away, because they have to be able to advocate for themselves, and they have to be able to make connections, and they have to share who they are. We can't reach them to teach them if we aren't giving them all of those tools. And I like to tell people, you have your PCS symbols on a card, and that's great when we want to tell our kids something that they need to do. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir on this one, but if we're not providing them something that they can tell us things with, then I think we're doing them a disservice. And I learned some from some phenomenal professionals. I had the opportunity to work with some great SLPs and AT folks, Sari, that have given me a lot of tools that I have then figured out how to utilize within my classroom. And I screw up all the time, and I don't always do it right, and that's okay because I'm trying. I'm learning that if I try, that's still better than if I'm not doing it. So, okay, tools that I have, and I actually brought most of them with me. I have, my context boards, and I actually have these for board games too. Along with this, we always on everyone's desk have their core vocabulary, and we teach to this at all times. We also have either a pod, or I have a few kids that have used textbooks. I haven't really used them a whole lot. I have a few kids that are either have dedicated devices or we are practicing how to use Avoca with them. My preferred app, at least at this point in my classroom, is Touch Chat. And I have kids that I do have like up to a 42 cell, but I start with like a 25 when I'm modeling with kids. And when I do pod, it's usually a 20 cell for the kids when they start. Did you have a question, Sari?
Yeah, so some of us know pod, but some don't. Can you give us the brief rundown? And then I'll also pop in a pod webinar that April did that you might want to check out if you want to learn more.
Yes. Okay, so pod is called, it's PODD, Pragmatic Organized Dynamic Display. This came out of Australia. Sari, interrupt me at any point if I get any of this wrong. It was done at CPAC, which is a school for children with cerebral palsy. And it is a partner assisted navigation system for communication. It's basically like a low-level iPad because it's multi-layered. And what you have is you have context cues within it. I don't know if you can see this right here, but it has a little number 2, because if I want to talk to my kids, I'll say, boys and girls, I have something to say. I'm going to go to more to say. And there's a little mark over here that tells me which page I'm going to turn to in it. And then I can say things like, I want to tell you something. And then that branches me to another page that I can then start having a contextual conversation with kids. What I do is we have these available almost all the time. If they start, ripping on them, I try and move them. But we try and do as much contingent comment as possible. I don't know if you guys have had that before, but the paras have all learned how to use these. And then if I have any agency people, which I do, I help them learn it too, so that everybody is able to model. And then I start modeling ways in which you can use this with the kids, both when you're doing instruction and when you're having, work behaviors and other things happen in the classroom. One thing that's also listed here that I did not talk about yet is a rap board. Now those are called read, ask, answer, and prompt. And I learned about these at a speech conference. Goodness, Sari, that was quite a while ago, wasn't it, when we had that one? That was done through NWACS. They are conversation boards, so you can ask open-ended conversational questions related to books. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll get out a book and I'll sit with a kid or a couple of kids if we're doing small group reading, and we'll read it. And I'll just leave this here. I might comment on a couple of things. This one's with the napping house. So what do you think that flea is going to do? What will that flea do? And you sit and you wait. And that's why it's ask, and then you wait, and then you wait, and then you wait, and then you give your own answer, and then you prompt the child to see if they want to have something else to say. Now, I also kind of made my own special versions that I utilize. Oh, it's RAP, read, ask, answer, and prompt. I also made them as a visual reminder for my kids when they're reading. So they have ones that relate to their reading material that they're working on. It's kind of a visual inventory to help them recall text from a story. The other cool thing about that is I can then ask them questions conversationally right on this while we're doing our specific goal reading. All right, so here we are. One of the things that I found when I did this the very first time, and this was years and years ago, the first time I ever got out the pod, and I just went like, fine, I'm going to try this because I built it and I had it already, was I had to go first. I had to be the one to model how to do it and to put myself out there to try. Because then if I did it, everybody else went, oh, okay, then we can try it too. I never can find all the words when I'm doing these things. And I've had a lot of people go, well, I just get flustered. And I'm like, okay, so I take a breath and I will say, I can't find it. Let's try this. It's a great way to model for the kids that you screw up and you can't find things and you have to practice finding something else. So that's one of the things that we do. And I do it individually. We do many of these things in small group, and I do this stuff whole group. When I'm talking to the whole class, I will put my pod on the overhead. And so all of the kids are looking at it on our big interactive whiteboard. And now that I got my interactive whiteboard, I actually am going to be downloading Chat Editor, which is basically a mirror of Touch Chat, which is a free app that you can do so that I can put it up on the screen and my kids can practice telling me things and navigating on our big interactive board also. Now, when paras are working with the kids, one of my recommendations is go buy and hand, if they've forgotten that device, hand it to them. If they're working on body parts, pull out the body parts section in your pod, and talk to them about, oh, it's like you're scratching your arm. You're modeling the communication while you're having a conversation and while you're doing the work. That's how kids are going to start meaningfully communicate. One of my favorite stories, and this goes back a ways, we had a young man who had a few years of pod, and he was talking with his para educator. It was writing. We were doing personal narratives, and he was writing, and he kept getting sidetracked to tell us grandma, grandpa, grandma, grandpa, grandma, grandpa. And we were like, buddy, we're not talking about grandma and grandpa today. We're talking about your picture. And he insisted and he insisted. And so he finally got through his work, and we said, okay, so you kept talking about grandma and grandpa. Are they here? Oh my gosh, you should have seen his face. We didn't know they had made an impromptu visit. And so because he kept telling us something that was unrelated, we kind of had to dig a little deeper and ask some pointed questions of him. And yep, grandma and grandpa had shown up the night before. And so that was why he wanted to tell us that. And if we hadn't paid enough attention enough to listen, we might have missed it. So fun way to see that sometimes what they're telling us is actually, sincere, real good communication. Okay, so I've got all sorts of stuff here. Let's talk about reading. Well, does anybody have any questions first? Things that I talked about or looked at? No? Okay. So ways that I use communication within reading. Unique learning systems. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It's the same agency that does News to You. It is one of the curriculum that we actually have here. And so one of the things that I do is we use it when reading the stories. If we're reading the story as a whole group, this is where the staff will be around the classroom sitting with the students, and they'll have their pod. They'll also have the communication board, the one that goes with that story, the context specific one. And they will sit and talk about it. They will help the kids find the words and look at it. And this again goes back a ways. We had a young man years ago who we were doing a unit on community, maps and travel, and we were on the places page. Let me see if I can show you in here. So we were on places, and so the para that was sitting with him had gone to places, and we had turned the page on places. And mine doesn't have it. No, it does. He was stuck on this page, and you can't see it very well here, but my buddy was so excited about Burger King. And he kept trying to talk to the para and tell them, sir, there's Burger King. And finally somebody said, is that your favorite place to go eat? Do you like to go to Burger King? And he hopped out of his chair. He was so excited that he got to tell somebody that that was what he loved. Now, that was contingently appropriate within the conversation. That was a place he likes to go in the community that related to our topic. And that was super meaningful for him. That meant he knew, hey, I can read the story and I can tell you my favorite place to go in the community is Burger King. It was one of those phenomenal accidents that happened because somebody had the tools there and was looking at it. That more so every year I find myself giving that little bit of grace and that little bit of, it's okay if we get a little off topic, because the voice is so important for the kids. And if we're brushing that off to get through the content, I think sometimes we forget. And I'm guilty of doing it all the time. I want to get through this material. We've got to get this learning done. But if I slow down, it really does tend to help. Now, when I want to make it really fun, if I'm doing small group reading, one of the things that I will do is and I usually have some people get overwhelmed by the stuff that I put in front of me when I'll do a lesson with the kids, because I'll very often have my core vocabulary page, because it's all over the place, an iPad and my pod, and I will switch back and forth when I'm doing it. Please don't try that if you've never done it. Pick one thing and figure out a way that you can do it within the classroom first. It takes time and experience and comfort to get to the level where I can. And if I flub up, I just really don't care anymore. I just go with it. One of the fun ones that I like to do is I had a couple of kids who really love Goodnight Gorilla. And so that was one of the books that we would use. And because it has so little text, I can add a lot of words to it. And I can assign text using my core. They're going to go out. They're going out. Oh, what is he going to do? There's so many generic messages I can do on this one that I would then, potentially be on my animal pages in my pod. So we can talk about some of the animals and even some of the animals that you cannot see because they're not in my book. But when I go to animals in my touch chat, I can actually get, I gotta find my animals. You can find animal sounds. And I don't know how many of you know that, but you can get to, and it's not on the level I have this one set at right now. Animal sounds are in the iPad so that you can go to that section. And if you find that animal, the kids get to click on it and make that sound. And so then you can have a conversation. Which is your favorite animal? Which sound did you like the best? It gives them that connection to the text and it allows them to have something to say about it. And I also do the elephant myself because it's a reward for one of my kids if I make my elephant sound for her and she participates. So, and then emotional learning. This is a big one. And Sari, I even brought the book that you sent me because I love it so much. This group has not had a lot of time reading, you know, sitting and listening to a text. And I read the comprehensive literacy book, Comprehensive Literacy for All text this summer and did a book study. Thanks, Sari, for adding that, with a bunch of professionals here in the district. And I learned some new things about how I teach reading that I'm trying to implement. And one of them includes just reading books without all of the adaptations and things to them. So one of the favorite ones that I started with, because my kids have big, big feelings right now. And sometimes they struggle to share their big, big feelings. So for about a week, when we went to small groups, we would read The Boy with Big, Big Feelings. And what I did, because he has a large variety of feelings, and I really like the feelings in my pod better, they're more focused rather than the feelings that I can find in touch chat because it also includes describing words. So I would navigate, and I show my correct navigational focus. I'm not doing that for this one for you guys, but I went to my feelings pages in the pod as I was reading. So I had it sitting here and I was reading the text. I wish I could set it all up so I could show you guys this because it's very difficult to do. And I would read it and then I would find that feeling on the page and I would touch it and I would just wait a second to see what the kids would do. I had a couple who tried to imitate the face. I had another one who pointed to a different feeling. And it was really interesting because it's quite a text heavy book for a bunch of kids that don't read text or don't have as much experience reading text, but it was phenomenal, their response to just talking about feelings, looking at a book. And the art is beautiful. The kids really enjoyed it. I liked how the colors matched the ideas. He's got loud and he's got dark when he's upset, and it's more red when he's angry. And so we talked about that. And then we even looked and see what are some things that make you feel angry? What is something that happens when it's loud, so that the kids could start talking about those feelings. I found a lot of my kids on the spectrum have such big feelings and it makes them uncomfortable. That I have a couple that have rehearsed, I feel happy all the time, as kind of their way to cope with things. And so we work really hard on acknowledging those feelings. And because it segues in, we'll just turn to the next one. We'll talk a little bit more about emotional learning and feelings when we get to the behavior section, because so much of the adaptive and behavior things that I work on in the classroom involve communication as well. Oh, I forgot one I'm reading. I told you a little bit. So this, like if I'm doing reading with a kid, this is their visual inventory to help them remember. And they'll have their text. And when they have their text, it's just what it looks like exactly in the book. It says the fish swims. And so if they can't remember the word, they can look to this one to do it. I can also do this with my kids with complex communication needs who might not speak. This is their way of telling me that they read it. Because if they can find it here and then they can find it here, that's awesome. And then if they have a dedicated device or they're trialing, we can also practice finding it in there so they can have that voice to read that to me. The other thing I like to do is I like to ask them questions. At the beginning of the fish story, when I was working with a kiddo the other day, I said, do you think he's going to catch the fish? And we've been practicing yes and no. It's been a really big thing because my kids don't have yes, no consistent yet. So it was really good for him to practice saying, yes, I think he's going to catch the fish, or no. And then we can compare once we finish that story to see if he was correct or not. Okay, so math Not always as many options to communicate unless you want to ask some questions during your work, but I do love having PCS symbols and my devices handy, especially if I'm modeling counting numbers and shapes. It's really nice to just pull up what you have. This one's on my number page right now. So if I'm doing story sequencing, I can say first, second, and third, or first, next, last. If I want to program it, if we're practicing counting, we can count them and then we can find them in here and they get to tell me with their voice what they had. If I don't have that, I always have a pod to allow the kids to practice utilizing it. And that's a great natural model when you're doing that within math. Today I was talking to a new young lady who's coming in for some communication practice in my room and using my pod and core by asking her some questions. I was able to get her to tell me that, because she doesn't talk very often in her classroom, that she has 2 sisters and 2 brothers and they are bigger than her. And she likes to go to the park to ride her bike fast with her aunt and her mom, just by asking her some questions while we were working. It was super cool, because then I went and asked the teacher and she went, yeah, she actually does have all that. So it was phenomenal to see her do that. I took just 2 or 3 minutes within, she'd finished the work we were doing. And I had 2-3 minutes with her. So I just sat and had that conversation. And it was lovely to see her engaged using this level of communication at this point. And I don't have a picture, Sari, of the boxes, the math boxes, but in my classroom, one of the things that I set up years ago is I set up a math box, and it has every single tool you're going to need to teach small group math. Within it, it also has a checklist of every kid's goals referenced. So when I group kids by goals, you know exactly which skills they're working on. You have the materials there, and then you have all the PCS images within that if you don't happen to have a device with you. There's always a pod nearby, and if there isn't, I grab one and set it out for somebody because it allows for conversation. And you can comment on how kids did on their work to model that too. Sari, did you want to say something?
That picture, because I took a picture because I loved it.
Which one?
One of the things I love, sorry, was that your paraeducators could pick up that box and know exactly what that student was working on and have all the tools, even though, like you said, they're all over the classroom. But you're just such a well-run unit.
We try. There are some moments of chaos right now, but we are trying. Written expression. I think, Sari, we'll probably have time for a little bit of video. One of the things that I do is I actually got trained on our district writing curriculum for primary grades years ago and was involved in some of our early work. We used Dave Madison and the district has adapted it for writing personal narratives, but I got to actually be involved with Dave and we did some videotaping in my classroom of how we had adapted it to make it work for kids with complex communication needs. And it was really fantastic. The work has changed a little bit this year, partly because of what I learned this summer and partly because this group is in a very different place, that we haven't made it as far as in past years. But one of the things that I do is when we are doing our personal narrative writing, and I'm going out of order on this because I had a hair to go that way. We support and model. I was telling you about the young man and grandma and grandpa, and he kept getting derailed during his writing. We take photos of the kids. It's the easiest way to make sure we are able to write about things that have meaning for them. And then we sit with them and we work through questions of who, and there are my question words, of who and where and what and when, and they're on here. They're not on that one. They're who and where and what has happened to answer the questions, so that we can take notes along the way and allow the kids to do a personal narrative with a drawing that goes with it. And we assist them with the drawing. And that's where it says A in the grandparent visit, because I got so excited to tell you about that one. They can tell you a lot of stuff if you model it and give them the opportunities. And for a while, it might feel like you're putting a few words in their mouths. It's funny because I've more than once been corrected by a kid telling me that that wasn't actually what happened. I'd be saying something and they'd go and they'd say this one. I'm like, oh, okay, sorry, I chose the wrong word. Thanks for telling me. I like when you use your words to tell me. I didn't bring a virtual pencil, but we also use virtual pencils and it's fantastic. I've had some kids tell me things through virtual pencils before too. The idea is you've got a board just a communication board, single page. If you have, most kids that have a pod have an alphabet page in the back, so you could totally use that one too. The vowels on my virtual pencils are a different color, and they all align down the side. So A, E, I, O, and U run down the side, and they're a different color than all the other letters. But what happens is the kids basically get to use us as a puppet to write for them. So they point to the letters that they want to have below the line. It's very much like, you know, a little kid's, I'm writing just like my mommy, which my daughter loves to do. So we let the kids do that. And I've had kids stop me, because it also includes stop. It tells me I'm all done. It tells me, you know, another turn. And I've had kids trying to start spelling words. I've even had kids, when we finished that part of it, make a sound. Like I had one guy who was writing about a bird years ago. And he made a sound because we found the wrong bird. And he kept making the sound until we figured out what the sound was. And he told us which bird he was talking about that he had seen. It takes a while to do. And it's not an easy thing to set up in your classroom, but the stories I have and the writing we've gotten over the years is phenomenal. Okay, story sequencing. This is a new goal I started this year with one young lady because she's fantastic and she can do it, but it's, I wanted to give her a new challenge. QWERTY board for ABC for writing? No, I don't use a QWERTY. I can, but I have so many other boards around that I don't usually use a keyboard. If they're keyboarding,
April, I was thinking, so with your alternative pencil, is it alphabetic? Is it?
It's in alphabetical order.
Okay.
It is A to Z order. It's not QWERTY. I hadn't thought about putting it together as a QWERTY. Most of the ones that I've seen have all just been alphabetical order with the vowels highlighted. I would love to see if there are other kinds out there.
Yeah, and I'll put a link.
That's what I was asking, was how you had it organized. Yeah.
I have it in alphabetical order. Yes. And I actually share it. Sherry, I think there's one in my drive.
Okay, I'll take a look.
In the writing section.
Okay, yeah. And I'll put a link to some templates for those who are interested in downloading them. And you can see different types that are available.
Cool, yeah. And then if you have any fringe, you know, if they're doing letters with their alphabet or their virtual pencil, sorry, alternative pencil, I should have called it the right thing. I then make sure I've got something here that I can comment. Oh, I like how you're doing that. Do you want some more? And a lot of that core is really good for that. Because this one, it's got so many things that I can make generic messages with. I like it. Oh, do you want to do some more? You look like you're telling me you're all done. And so this sits out for the kids all the time on the desks. It's just a part of what we have at all times. All right, so let's go to the next one. Oh, sorry, do you want to show video?
What's up to you? Do you want me to?
We can do a few minutes of video. This video is from virtual instruction. I was a virtual teacher last year. I actually remoted in and did writing instruction via Zoom for my kids that came back to in person too, because that group was such strong writers and nobody had the experience and knew how I did it. Continue those goals for a few weeks. I just took that on as another thing I wanted to make sure I did for my kids.
So April, this one, I didn't put personal narrative writing, but I did put
opinion.
That's
awesome.
On it. So this one we probably haven't seen before.
No, but we've also done opinion writing. And so when we start opinion writing, one of the things we do is we go to the opinion section. This is what I think in my head. And when I started doing opinion writing, we spent a lot of time just learning opinion words because it wasn't something we'd done before. And then I had a thought bubble because in the writing curriculum that we do, things that you say are a speech bubble, but if it's something that you think, it's a thought bubble. And so I had a big thought bubble on my wall. And once the kids chose an opinion word that they liked, we would put them up in that opinion bubble. And so for a long time, those were the ones that we referenced when we were doing opinion writing for in-person pre-COVID.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, it's right in the corner.
Different kind of writing this week. You need a pen, a glue stick. All right. Here we go.
I have a lot of things all over when I'm working, guys.
Boys and girls.
I'm reaching for my pod.
I'm going to go to more to say. I want to talk about something. So one of my favorite things to talk about with you guys. I want to talk about food. Ugh. Okay, so I'm going to go to food. And I want to talk about what you eat. I want to know your opinion on something. So let's see, I'm going to turn the page and see if I can find it. So I don't know who makes the food at your house, but whoever makes the food, sometimes when I make the food at my house, my kids like it. And sometimes they tell me, "Ugh, Mama, I don't like it." Or they have one thing, because I can tell you that Olivia loves sausages. That's one of her favorites. And Lucas loves cheeseburgers. They're different. Lucas does not really like sausage. And Olivia does not really like cheeseburgers. We all like different things. And today I want to know, I'm going back to page 1, what you think. So we're going to go to opinions. And this is why I have given you opinions, because this is about what you think. Ready? Here we go.
I was set up in my classroom
Pictures up there.
for a while as I did it. And when I do opinion writes, I don't always use the word because. That's one of the things that we learned when we were doing that curriculum. I like blank, and then you can describe it a little bit. But sometimes I take the because out. This one was a pre-made one that we used. We did things a little bit differently during COVID for virtual instruction. But thank you, Sarah, for sharing that one. So what I do then is
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know.
You want to move on?
I want to move on. I want to model the
Okay.
stuff I've been playing with the kids with the yes, no, and the core things right now. So I think so. What we'll do is I am just going to sit right here for a second and tell you about my favorite new thing before I move on. So I said my kids have had a really hard time with yes and no. This is not a group that has had a whole lot of, like I said, communication instruction through a lot of reasons, through COVID, through different classrooms. I actually got 8 new students in a year. That doesn't really happen very often in a life skills class. And I do things a lot differently in terms of communication than some teachers. So this is my big core board. I have a core on everybody's desk. I have core on the stuck to the tables. I have it like our big tables, my kidney table. I have it stuck next to the computers at the back of the room. I have it on the shelves by my toy cupboards because I keep my toy cupboards locked all the time because I want to make my kids have to tell me things in order to get what they want. So 2 of my favorite things to do once we've learned yes, no, is to ask for help and to ask for more, which everybody knows. But we've been playing a new game because the cupboards are locked and you have to ask me to open them if you want to play toys at playtime in my room. The new one we've been doing is I got a jar and I have a variety of different snacks when we do this. I put 1 or 2 of a kid's favorite snack in the bottom of my jar and they watch me do this. And I literally squeeze it shut and I hand it to them. And I wait and I wait and I wait. And most of them hand it to me, they shake it at me. And I said, well, what do you need to tell me? And the reason I only have a few on here is these are the ones we've practiced so far. As we add more words to core, it doesn't mean I'm not using them in situations. I'm not having them in this one. So they have to come up, and some kids are working on just a single help because that's where they are. Some of them have to say help, open it. And once they pull it up, they have to track it with me and say, help open it. And then I will open it and give them their snack. And I have watched more connections happen in the last 2 weeks with that. It's like they get handed it, they hop up and they run over to the core board to tell me because they're finally showing me that they're grasp that, oh, if I do this and I communicate with you, I can have what it is that I want, which has been phenomenal. And the way we got yes, no really down is we learned each other's names when school started because it was a whole new group and we were practicing reading names and practicing recognizing our peers. And we did songs and stuff to start. But then I very rapidly decided I wasn't going to go there anymore. We didn't need to do the same thing. So they helped me take attendance in the morning when we sit at morning circle. We sit together and we still look at those very same names and we look around the classroom because we were also working on greetings. And I asked the question, is so-and-so here today? And I have a yes and a no. And I like using different PCS images. I will have different images for yes and no in all sorts of different locations. And I will have some symbol sticks images or some board maker images, because for me, it's not about what image, it's about the kids generalizing the use of those images. So I pull one of my yes, nos, and I'll say, is so-and-so here today? Yes or no. And I'll even take a thumbs up or a thumbs down as a yes, no also, because that's one of the things that we work on. And they got really good in the last 3 weeks at being able to tell me if they were here. They'd look around the classroom to see. And I had about an 80% accuracy rate with kids that had not previously had yes, nos be very strong. So it was really, really fun. The next one we're going to play is What Is It? That's another one of my favorite core games. And I already got out Sarah my Christmas lights on the timer and let the kids play with them the other day, because they're working on asking for more with snacks. Again, several of the kids have not had much communication. But we play a game where there's a box, and I will literally stand behind this thing and look silly. I have this little box and it says, what is it on the front? And I'll duck down behind and I'll put one of my few things, and I'll put my fringe vocabulary up here. This is a great 10-minute filler activity when you need something, or your kids are really, in a good place, or you need them all in one place. And I'll stand up and I'll shake the box, and somebody comes up and they have to ask me to open it. So these are here, and they'll have to pull it up and they'll say, open it. And so I'll open it so they can look, but nobody else can. And then they get to tell me, so I have to put these back after they've asked me to open it. And what they would say is, it is, and then they would tell me what fringe it was. And then they get to play with whatever's in the box. If it's bubbles, if it's a wind-up toy, if it's my Christmas lights on a timer, if it's a treat that they got to have, if it's a flashlight they get to hold for the next couple of minutes. And I do tend to pick things that I know each child is really interested in to get that engagement, to get them to want to participate on that level with it. But those have been some of my very favorite new things I've been trying this year with this group. The other thing is I will do comments with the kids all the time. I will do things like, you are loud. I do not, there's my nose, not like it. Please stop. And they kind of just look at me like, oh, okay. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but I'm modeling. Or if somebody's covering their ears and getting upset, I'll say, oh, is she being loud? And you don't like it, just to model that communication as things are happening in the classroom. Okay, so let's go back to sharing the presentation for a second, because I want to show you, I want to talk about a few more things that I do with self-help. Okay, so communication, I said this earlier, it's a function and it's a necessity in life. These kids need to be able to stick up for themselves. So many of our kiddos, especially our complex communication needs kids, end up being victims and don't ever have the ability to say no. That's one of the first things I let kids tell me is no, and stop and go away. I'm actually working on that with one young lady. She got really upset with me this afternoon and she started kicking at me, and I said, just tell me to go. And I touched it on her core. Just tell me to go. And she sat there and she looked at me for a minute. She goes, go. And so I left. That gave her power to tell me not now. Now, I'll probably turn around and come right back 3 seconds later and redirect her again. But I'm helping teach her in the context of her behavior and what she's doing within the classroom, the power of using communication, either through this or through speech, because she's a little bit of both. One of my favorite stories, mine is different than my buddy's was years ago. On the kid pod, there's a little bumblebee on page 2 and it says buzz off. And one of my kiddos that came in as a first grader, and he didn't have any communication. It was the first thing he learned to tell me in his book, in his pod book, buzz off. So I'd actually sometimes make a buzzing sound as I moved away from him. And then I'd come right back and I'd say, okay, so now what do you want to tell me? Are you ready to do your work? He went from having no communication, and in a 5-year period with, phenomenal SLP, I think one of his last days in my class, he got in his iPad and he says, Miss April, I want a fish sandwich, please. All on his own. Sentence, period, everything. I almost drove to the store to buy him a fish sandwich for lunch. Okay, so how do we obtain what we need without the ability to ask for help? So much of what our kids are behaving, our behavior and the things that they need, is because they don't have communication. They're running through the classroom to try and go get something. They're pointing up here. So that's where I grab that book or I grab that iPad and say, you want something. Can you see if we can find what it is that you want? And I won't always give it to them, but I'm giving them the context to help. And that's the core vocabulary too. I have a sub para right now, and I watched her this afternoon, and she was watching one of my kids, and he was gesturing for something. And she knows to have him practice help because that's one of his first ones. But through that gesturing, he told her what he wanted, and so then she modeled it for him, and he was like, oh, okay, that worked. Because most often he starts yelling and hitting when he needs something, because that's what he's had is his voice for a really long time. And that's where we explicitly teach it. We don't just practice doing it, but we explicitly teach it. Every Friday is game day. And we get out board games and we play because we don't know how to play correctly. And that's one of the most important things for the kids to develop beyond advocacy and communicating their needs. And we use the core board and context boards at the same time, because the core board's on their desk and they get out their context board. So I'll have two kids sitting playing Connect 4. And they'll be practicing my turn and your turn. And then I'll be commenting using the board. Oh, look, you have 2 black. They're in a line. And so I'm modeling on the little board while they're practicing as they're playing, just with my turn and your turn on the core board. And they actually like playing, they're getting to the point where they look forward to Fridays and they sit down with each other. They're even starting to look at each other some of the time, which is just like, yeah. And that's where I said things like, locking your doors, locking your cupboards, and having those core boards there. So if they come over and they grab you and they pull you over, you're like, oh, did you need something? Do you want my help? Do you want me to open it? If you've got that going, even if you just set that one up. I forgot the other place you use the core board a lot, cafeteria. When the kids go to the cafeteria, there's tons of things they need help opening. There's things that they might like eating. There's things that they may not like eating. It might be loud. It's really great if you have one. We just keep it in the cart with a bunch of our other tools that we have so that it's there. My goal is to have a pod in there and also in my fire drill backpack, but I haven't quite gotten there yet because I've got a print of few extras. But just, I realized one day I had the kids all out at a fire drill and I didn't have any way to communicate with them correctly. So it's one of those things where until you realize it, you don't. But once you got it, I can sit out there with my kids and think, I have something to say. Or, because I had a few kids that get really worried about fire drills and I'll say, oh, something's wrong. Let's talk about what we're doing right now. I know that you are feeling upset about this noise. What do you think we should do when we get back? And so that, in the moment, that really helps because it kind of centers them and it slows down some of their angry feelings or upset feelings and gives them a way to process and then comment. One of my favorite stories about being mad, and Sarah got to see this one. I have a young lady who years ago, she has big feelings when things are not going her way, and she might pick up a desk and slam it on the ground or yell and scream. And I one day just went over to her, and I don't remember, Sarah, was I doing it in the pod or in her iPad at that point, or both?
I think she was using her iPad, but she had the core on her desk too.
Okay, so she was on the 42, and I went to it, and I said, it looks like you're feeling something. And so I went in to the feelings in her device, and I said, it looks like you're feeling mad. It was really funny. She looked right at me, and she said, sad. And I said, oh my goodness, girl. Thank you for telling me that you were sad. I didn't know that was what feeling I was seeing. She immediately stopped yelling. She immediately stopped pounding on things. She needed the validation of her feeling and to be acknowledged for what it was. Was I going to give her what she wanted? Probably not. I will still acknowledge the feeling because that gave her so much power in that situation. I'm mad. I'm upset. All done. You need to be able to tell me you're all done or something different. And I don't like it. Oh, that was awesome. This one just recently happened. I have a young lady who, when she gets upset, she shrieks like a siren and gets upset with me. And we've been practicing different phrases that she can say. And we don't do them when she's upset. We do them when she's getting upset, because once she's hit full scale, she's not going to hear us most of the time. So we practice. And one day I was watching her with one of the paras, and she was being challenged in a way she didn't like, and I could see it coming. And so I preemptively went over and I said, did you want to say something about how you're feeling? And she didn't use the "I don't like it" phrase, or one of the ones we've been practicing. She's one of my kids who always says, "I feel happy." And she went into her iPad and she said, "I am not happy." And I just went, oh, I gave her a big hug, because that was so fantastic that in that moment, and she changed the words. She made them her words. And I said, "I'm sorry you don't feel happy. Can I give you a hug and then you can finish your work?" And it made all the difference for her. She was able to get through this challenging writing activity she was having to do. And it was phenomenal. And the writing activity is one I didn't speak of. She's doing picture sequencing cards, but then the challenge for her is I'm asking her to assign her own text to those cards. So she'll put down a 3-picture sequence of a young lady who's putting on her pajamas, brushing her teeth, and going to bed. And I'm working with her to practice using her iPad and thinking about what she sees to assign text to it that she can then write. She doesn't have to write it motorically if she doesn't want to, but I want her to start building some sentences for me that correlate. And that was a new one. And then, the most phenomenal thing ever is just being able to ask to take a break. And what you need in order to take that break. So that's kind of, and once you teach a kid to ask for a break, then you can teach them to come back from their break. But until they can tell you no, until they can tell you to go away, and until they can tell you they need a break, you're going to be fighting the other things before you can ever get to the context of what it is you really want to teach. So I'm still teaching reading because they're reading all these things, and I'm still teaching math and all the ways that we're counting, and I'm still teaching, writing and all the ways that we practice writing. But in everything we do, we try and have the communication be a part of it. Now, you can't do all of it at once. So when we started, we picked one. And if you guys do TPEP, when I picked one, I always picked one that would be my whole year's goal. It was my focus for the year. The year I started to do core, it was a year of core, and it happened to be my comprehensive year. So I was able to do it as a small group goal, and I could pick a couple of kids that I wanted to make some progress, and I could pick a whole group goal, and then I could pick a collaboration goal, and that was where I could use my learning improvement time to work with my staff, and back then even to work with parents to practice how to use these things. And that's one of the things that we really work hard to do, is we really work hard to use our time when we have it as a team to talk about patterns that we're seeing, to talk about communication that we're seeing. And it's funny because that year I remember one of my data submissions for how my kids were making progress is every time any kid did something new on the core, somebody would write it on a Post-it note, stick it on the wall in the corner. So I actually took a picture of all the Post-it notes, and then I took them and I broke them all down to match up with my goals. But it was really, really fantastic to watch those Post-it notes hit the wall and see all those ways in which the kids had been communicating something that we hadn't previously done before. So if you go back tomorrow and you want to read a story, and if you've got a pod, pull out a pod and talk about the animals. If you don't have the iPad to make the animal noises, make the animal noises yourself, and then ask the kids, what's your favorite one? Sit with a ULS lesson and see if you can find a way to make a contingent comment with somebody. Sit while they're doing writing and ask them things about family. The other thing I do to make sure I know my families and my kids is I send home surveys at the beginning of the year, so I know important people that have come, that are in their lives, or special things that they're doing that allow me to have a good insight in what's going on. All right, I think that's it. I'm going to stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions. I know it's a lot of content and it's a lot of things. If you are an SLP or an AT specialist, one of the things that I like to ask is, what is it you encounter when you go into classrooms from teachers in terms of wanting to try implementing some of this stuff? Do you find that they want it? Do you find that they're struggling with it? Is there things that you've done that have been really successful to get people to want to do it in their classrooms? Or are you successful when you go in and model it? Because until my SLP years and years ago came in and modeled, and I went, wow, what is that? I want to learn how to do that. It made a huge difference for me. Anybody have any?
It's a struggle.
It is a struggle. Is it a struggle with the staff or with the kids?
From my perspective with the staff, and I have I have some teachers that are very open to it. I did a Wednesday was a week ago. I did a professional development with a teacher and her paras, and I visited that class today, and they had already taken Touch Chat and put the Fringe vocabulary for their storybook of the month on it. They did that all by
Nice.
themselves.
So they found the
And
power in it right
using
away.
it. Then I have another teacher that we've taken core posters in, core boards for each table. She won't put a thing up, won't put it down, won't use it.
Has she given you any reason why?
The kids will tear it up.
So
That's what
the
I
other
said.
reason they're all in a bag is because I have one person who does like to tear it all up. And so I put them up here, and then when I want to use them, I put them out. And what she's figured out is as I put them out and she learns the power of the words, she's not pulling them off anymore. She might actually come over, and this is my whirling dervish. I mean, she might write on the walls. She does what all the things all the time. She's got her own agency person, and she's ripped these all off more than once. And I looked at her and I went, okay, you ripped them off. I'll put them in a bag. Sometimes it takes even, wizened and veteran teachers a different kind of change in perspective to deal with some of that. And that was one of the things that I've had to let go of in the last couple of years is I can't have nice things in my room. And yeah, you can rip that up and we'll just put it back together again. But my suggestion would be don't even use that one, use this one. And then just practice touching it to start.
I think that's one of the primary things is because these kids that are in your classroom, and we have 4K, we have a 4, like you mentioned very early on, a 4-5K high support class. And these are kids, they don't know how to sit at a desk.
No, they're practicing and learning all of those things.
And if all this stuff is out in the classroom, what are they going to do to it? They're going to go tear it up because they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to play.
No, and that's okay. That's where we just put it back and we keep trying to do it again. And it becomes a struggle. And there are days that, I have kids who get mad and start pulling it up. So I'll just pull the whole thing off. And then the next day I'll tape it back down. My pod is beaten up for a reason.
It'll be interesting that my colleague that does the same thing I do, and then one of our speech language therapists or pathologists in the district, we're doing kind of a test this year where each of us is doing professional development with the teachers differently.
Yeah.
And we're going to compare to see which one seems to be the most effective.
Nice.
So that will be interesting.
Because then you can take a look and see which approach worked. The thing that we really appreciated is in our district, the paras have to have a certain number of credits every year. And so the year that we started to learn pod and navigating in Touch Chat, everybody was pretty apprehensive and nervous about it because you don't want to look like an idiot, which is why I said, I had to go first and I had to look like the big idiot. And I just keep doing that because I don't really care.
Well, everyone makes mistakes too.
They do. Yeah, absolutely. And you'll look silly, and you'll screw it up. But we did it on Fridays and we submitted with our district to get credit for the classes so that they got the practice time and then they got their hours that they needed. And it was a safe environment with a few of us that we joked around and we did it together. And it really gave us some freedom to try it with each other. We'd have to practice finding something, or we'd have to practice saying a sentence without talking. And it made a huge difference. It was a really phenomenal thing for us.
That was one of the things I did want to share as you were talking, that I encourage this year, particularly, I have encouraged the teachers to go to their principals and say, I want my paras to get credit for these hours that we do the professional development. And there has been no principal that has said no.
They won't. If they're, at least in my experience with administrators, if you were directly learning things that are going to benefit the students, 90% of the time they're going to do it. And the other thing is it never hurts to ask. I have a couple examples of that. Years ago, I wanted to go actually officially get pod training. So I asked, and between the director of special ed and my principal, they paid for it for me because it was in the local area and I was able to go. So they paid for a substitute and they paid for me to go. And it was like, yeah. My latest thing is I've been working with a group of people and our new director of special ed was able to secure funding that we are putting core communication boards with Fringe specific to each school on every elementary school playground in the district this year. And so I decided I know the assistant superintendent really well, and I wanted it to be an action item that they have to talk about this, and they have to watch the video that we've made, and they have to have somebody that's going to participate. So I asked her, and it's going out as an action item to all of the elementary principals in the district. You got to show this video, you got to do this survey because this is coming. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to use students here in the building, because I have a lot of staff students. And we're going to do some training videos that are then going to go out to students and to staff on how to utilize the boards on the playground. And it was funny because I get like communication in the classroom is the hill I'm going to die on as a teacher. And I do this every time. I actually did it during the video that we did to all the districts. And so I will go hide when the video is shown at my own school. But the AT specialist was doing the video with me. And when we finished it, she looked at me, she said, "I'm so glad you did that. I was hoping you were going to," because I think it sometimes shows power to people who don't grasp what that really means. So yeah, ask to get credit, ask to try these things, because it really, really helps the kids. And it helps you because you're able to understand your kids better. And once you understand them better, you can teach them better. You can reach them where they are and help them move forward. So that was my soapbox moment for today. Thanks, everybody.
Definitely.
Does anybody else have any questions? Because I have to wrap up and go get my daughter from daycare. Oh yeah, they are putting them out all over. Linda, have you seen some of the accessible parks that they're putting out? There's one in Kirkland too. I want to go visit it. And then once we do the elementary school playgrounds, we're going to push to do common areas at the middle schools and high schools. Because it's not like once they leave elementary school, they can speak necessarily. They can communicate. So, and we're calling it a community project, because it's not just for the kids in the schools, it's for everybody that visits our playgrounds. And I think it will be a humongous, wonderful.
Sorry.
You're
Thank you so
fine.
much. And thank
Yeah.
you for sharing your passion. We always learn a lot from you.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. I have